Hello everyone, this is Dalen75 Games. This video will be part of a new series that I'm making that will be about my thoughts on games that are currently on my channel, games that I am looking forward to adding in the future, and games that I am taking a look at that are still in development that may or may not be added. This is not a review, but rather about the impression that these games have left with me through playing them or from researching. The plan is to release one of these videos twice a month, although this will depend on the time that I have as well. I will state things to the best of my knowledge, and I am sure now that now and then I'm going to make mistakes. So instead of bludgeoning me over those, please just write a constructive comment. This also goes for how I pronounce things, because I may have either never said the word out loud before, or there are times when my tongue trips over words such as cinnamon. It would also be my first scripted video, and I do consider myself a much better speaker when I have something to go by, rather than live commentary, which I feel I definitely need to improve. If anyone has seen some of my Let's Plays, then you'll know what I mean. However, that being said, I've noticed that even the best of us, when making live commentary, tend to make mistakes now and then. When I played MMOs in the past, on TeamSpeak or Vent, I would always pause when talking when there was a fight occurring, in order to fully concentrate on it. I'm not sure where that came from, possibly from classic EQ, and now I'm attempting to unlearn that as I make my videos. Alright, now to the first video. Project 1999 EverQuest is my topic because I started creating my official online videos of this game first, and it is near and dear to me simply because it's an emulation of my first massively multiplayer game that I played back in the ancient year of 1999. I will be referencing Classic EQ and Project 1999 EQ throughout this video. Since the latter is an attempt to recreate the former, they are essentially the same. Today, a huge chunk of the under 30 MMO players would never have had the chance to play Classic EQ, let alone hear of Project 1999, which has attempted to recreate that classic feel. Now, at the time of making this video, I have been playing the game for about 3 months, and because real life and other games have kept me occupied, I would have to label myself a casual player, even though at times I play the game like a hardcore player. However, playing like crazy in spurts doesn't count. A casual player in an MMO and getting to experience endgame these days is common enough, but in Classic EQ, being casual can be a real hindrance. What is Project 1999 EverQuest? Simply put, it's a free-to-play recreation of classic EverQuest. It's what I and many other players experienced back between the years of 1999 and 2001 when EverQuest was new. However, once the third expansion, Shadows of Luckland, hit in December 4th of 2001, a lot changed, most notably the graphics, which were greatly improved in some ways. Even so, I never got to play that expansion onward, so my memory of EQ was right in the timeline of Project 1999. So playing EQ live today will not look like or play exactly like EQ Classic. When the new graphical improvements are brought up with many people in Project 1999, however, many people point out that yes, parts of the game look better, but some of the animations are actually a step back. I myself cannot confirm this because I haven't made the comparison. My experience with the new graphical engine is based on what I have posted for my 3 newbie Let's Play videos on EQ Live. EverQuest is the first 3D MMO to hit the market and was launched back in the March of 1999. It wasn't the first MMO, but as far as I know, it revolutionized multiplayer gaming and most likely led to the creation 5 years later of World of Warcraft by Blizzard Entertainment. Since World of Warcraft, the MMO player base has exploded worldwide and has made the term massively multiplayer online, or for short, MMO, a common household word. Now here is a clip of what EverQuest originally looked like when the game launched. You can see that the actual view of the game world is quite small, and the user interface is enormous. You'll also see here the tutorial which came with the original game, but was played offline. I remember playing this several times before I actually had a chance to get online to play the actual game. It didn't seem to help as much as I would have liked, because even when I did get on to play the online game, I was quite lost. EQ had me very confused. And if it weren't for the friendly help of other players, especially one player who was literally explaining things to me for about 45 minutes, face-to-face in game, then I would have taken a lot longer to grasp what I was supposed to be doing. After playing for a short while, I used what I learned and then helped 2 or 3 others in a similar fashion, so in effect I paid it forward. That is really what the game is, a very difficult 3D adventure online game. Difficult compared to just about every other MMO since, and requires players to work together in order to succeed for much of it. When I say difficult, I really mean it. Project 1999 EverQuest really nailed it when it comes to the level of difficulty that I remember experiencing. This isn't a game for casual players unless you want to take 6 months to a year to get to the end, that with just playing one character and no other. The biggest difference between Project 1999 EQ and Classic EQ is that we have a much friendlier and fully adjustable user interface as well as higher resolution. I am sure there are several smaller things I'm missing out, but if you don't seek those out, then the game won't feel any different from memory. Those who put together Project 1999 EverQuest also fixed many bugs within the game, though some of the original design decisions were a little out of whack, such as weapons and spells that are area effect that also includes units damage. These things have been kept in, no doubt not to change the overall feel from Classic EQ, even though by all logic they are severely lacking. So to go along with the topic of my thoughts on Project 1999 EverQuest, I'd like to share 2 stories of memories I have of Classic EQ. One before playing it, and my history with it afterwards. I originally found out about the game in a magazine. Yes, a magazine back when that was the prime source of gaming information. I think it was 1998 when I read about it. Having to spend money each month to play was something of a concern, especially since I was young and didn't have my own credit card. Regardless, I had to know more about this game. Online gaming was new to me at the time, and the thought of being able to play with hundreds or possibly thousands of people in the same game was mind-blowing. I remember seeing my friend play Diablo online and pushing him to ask those others in his game where they lived and what was it like there. And that was only playing with 2 or 3 others at the same time. I had read a review of the game when it came out, and I'll never forget the part where the reviewer and one of his friends were in a dungeon, quite possibly Black Burrow, and they were fighting gnolls. At some point they were next to a doorway, and they couldn't quite see all the way into the next room. The reviewer told his friend, well, just go in and see what's in there, sarcastically. But his friend thought he was being serious. Big mistake. They were attacked by too many and quite possibly too tough monsters for their level. The reviewer took off, fell into water. Thinking that the gnolls wouldn't follow him into the water, he thought, wow, I should be safe here. His friend was murdered, and then the gnolls chased him into the water and finished him off. He was amazed that the AI-controlled monsters could do that. What does that say for online gaming in the year of 1999? Tons. Let's put this into perspective for a moment. I bought my first modem with my Christmas money in the Boxing Day sale in 1997, and being online was extremely exciting. What did I do at first? I hit up the chat rooms, of course. That was all the rage back then, since, well, I don't think I had many games capable of playing online for about a year. I almost lost my girlfriend at the time over that, but that's another story we won't go into. So finally, a game came along that had me extremely interested, and it was played online with thousands of others in the same server. I could make online friends, and as a group we could run amok in a fully fleshed out fantasy world. I'd never experienced anything like this at all, ever. When I finally got to play, of course my knowledge of the game mechanics and how you're supposed to engage with it were extremely lacking. Not only that, but how to properly interact with others was also a huge part of how you need to learn how to play. Over time, I gradually came to realize that those rules of player interaction were just as important as how to survive, kill monsters, loot, and level up. The second story is just that, how I dealt with other players. I've always had my head lost in fantasy. So when I played around with my Wood Elf Ranger for a week, fell off the Kelethan City platform, and lost my starting tunic, I saw a role-playing guild named Children of the Mother, and I instantly knew that they were the ones for me, simply because I had made the connection with the Mother of Elves, Tuner. I was accepted into their ranks, and they helped me with advice, and I often grouped with one of their members. I was even able to get my girlfriend to play the game, and she joined the guild as well. One of the greatest achievements I had set for myself was to construct the True Shot bow. For someone with little in-game money and no proper guide on how to increase my trade skill in fletching, this was something I was never able to do in Classic EQ. Eventually, after a couple of months, I saw the limitations of the Ranger class, especially after badly losing a duel in front of nearly the entire guild to a Dark Elf Shadow Knight who was 2 levels below me. A few weeks later, I decided to start a new character and I created a Dark Elf Wizard, not knowing that I went from the most underpowered class to arguably the second most underpowered class. I joined a Dark Elf only role-playing guild named Rift. I quickly became an officer and helped the guild grow. It was then that I had some of the best guild experiences in the game, and when we had about 15 to 20 players at peak time, I never had so much fun or felt so part of something in a game before. My girlfriend created a Dark Elf cleric and joined the guild as well. In retrospect, I had a good group of online friends. It was that experience that I have since tried to recapture in the past 14 years. However, that being said, I took a bad turn in my life when my girlfriend and I split up after 5 years. She was the one who had the credit card that the game was registered to, so I lost all my characters in the game when the account was taken away from me. A few months later, I used my own credit card and returned to the game, and even came back to the guild Rift. By then, nothing was the same. I had changed, and the guild had changed as well. In players, and considering I was just starting out again compared to their 40 to level 50 plus characters, I was no longer able to group with my friends. It also didn't help seeing my ex-girlfriend log in with her and even my old characters. I was told from somebody in the guild that she'd stripped my Dark Elf wizard and sold off all his gear. She was, however, poetically kicked from Rift because she vouched for her friend to join the guild. This friend wasn't a Dark Elf and was instead an enchanter who only disguised himself as a Dark Elf. When this was discovered, the guild leader, who I was friends with, got rid of her. I don't think my guild friends were happy with her anyway, especially after they'd seen how she treated me and my characters after the breakup. Nevertheless, with my new Dark Elf wizard, after a month or so I just couldn't play with my old guild anymore. I suppose the breakup and changes since were too hard on me. Nothing was the same, and I was so down on myself that I didn't want it to get out who I was, other than to my closest friends who I played with, because I didn't want to run into my ex. So I left the server and started anew. I chose Ixar, an Ixar Shadow Knight, and I began my new adventures on the team PvP server Talon Zek. By then, I had really got to know the game well, since at this point it was in the latter half of the year 2000. I had little experience with PvP prior to this, and in that area I had to learn a lot. It's not easy playing an Ixar in a non-PvP server. In general, the NPCs who aren't in Ixar tend to hate you to the point of attacking quite often, so outside of Kunark, which is the Ixar continent, it wasn't too friendly. In the team PvP server, this was made way worse. I had joined various guilds, but none were as great as my experience in Rift, even though one was a role-playing guild with about the same amount of members. It took a lot of courage to venture out into the world in a team PvP server. Battles between players occurred all over the place, and you couldn't ever relax because quite often getting the drop first on other players meant victory. Being able to see invisible and to be invisible were the two most important spells that one could have when alone. There was an 8-level limit above and below with whom you could attack, although it wasn't always obvious who was attackable. Oftentimes players would try to attack you only to discover that you were too low and their attacks did nothing. Then they'd move on. Later they changed the consider system to show all players within your range as being even to you. I think that helped a lot, especially with bottom feeding, since usually players would attack lower levels. The only thing you could loot from them was money that they were currently carrying. This might have been incentive for me to come over to the server, since I believed before that they could actually loot gear off of you. One gamey trick to the game was to disconnect from the game itself when in a fight, which would reset you to AI control for a couple of minutes after you were gone. The reason this helped was because the AI at your level, if you were mid-level or higher, was much tougher than any player of that level, which is a big part of the reason why Classic EQ is so tough in general. I admit to pulling this off at least once and maybe a few more times. The one I recall was when I was jumped by 2 barbarians in Wrath Mountains and resorted to disconnecting myself since I had no chance to otherwise win. The AI, me, fought them off and I was able to return unharmed. They knew what I had done, and one of them sent me a tell saying something to the extent of, "Nice trick." Well, it beat losing my cash and having to do a corpse run, though it's not something I would say should be done since it exploits the game and is unfair to other players. Eventually, at some point in the first half of 2001, probably around April, I left the game and never came back until my newbie Let's Play that I created about 3 months ago. The first reason why I stopped playing EverQuest in 2001 was because I had grown tired of the dungeons my team was getting experience from being raided by other teams. Eventually, those other teams claimed the one I was going in my level 40s as their own, and my team no longer had access to it. This was done by force. The other reason was that a good chunk of the players and all the teams between levels 50 to 60 were joining one guild. I forget the name of that guild, but when all 4 teams can join one guild and work together, then they are basically destroying the spirit of the server. I didn't mind it being light versus dark. As a darkie, I understood everyone outside of being a troll, ogre, dark elf, and Ixar was fair game, even though the other teams could attack and kill each other, but for the most part they worked together against us. So that's how it became lighties versus darkies. When not only was that one guild, which we nicknamed the Panda Guild, becoming the #1 on the server, but other guilds began to emulate them, then in my mind the server was destroyed. So I left the game at that point, and my Ixar Shadow Knight was level 48, which was the highest I had attained in EQ, and still is as of this video. I'm not sure if anything was done to correct this by Varant, the company that ran the game at the time. That's my experience with Classic EQ. With Project 1999 EverQuest, Classic EverQuest has been completely recreated. They launched the game in October of 2009 on private servers, using the same game but updated by 10 expansions to do this. So they needed to do some work to downgrade it back to Classic EQ. While they don't have any team servers up at the moment, they do have a regular blue server and a red PvP server. One expansion is currently out for it, which is the Ruins of Kunark. The Scars of Velius expansion hopefully will be coming out shortly. From there they plan to not include any more expansions and just keep the game as it is, but hopefully some balance changes will eventually be forthcoming in the spirit of the game. One thing to keep in mind is that since Project 1999 EverQuest Blue server has been out now for over 4 years, and the expansions have remained stagnant. So far for 3 years or so since the Ruins of Kunark, there has been a high inflation of gear and platinum, which is the game's basic unit of currency. So that means there is a lot of gear to be shared and a lot more platinum floating around than there was between 1999 and 2001. This, of course, is also helped by veteran players returning to the game who by now know their stuff and have a much more mature and developed internet to aid them with anything they need to look up. The trading hub in the Eastern Commonlands is alive and well in Project 1999, just like in Classic EQ. Here you will find at peak times hundreds of players trying to sell their items. I've never seen this in any other game. It can be frustrating at times just waiting around and auctioning your items, but in this way, if you pay attention, you can really come to know what items are just by clicking on them as they go by. Since there is no in-game auction, players are forced to sell in person. Project 1999 EverQuest is a hard game that at times has me wondering if I should continue playing when I get some horrible random death and lose experience. You lose about 1/10 of your experience for that level when you die, and you can even lose levels that way. The corpse runs are, in my opinion, the worst part of the game, and if your character is unable to bind themselves close by, then you will have to spend a good deal of time running back to your corpse, gearless, and getting the message you are out of food and water, then to you are hungry and thirsty. The difficulty of the monsters you fight, whom everyone just calls mobs, for mobile object, which is a throwback to the pre-MMO days when things were labeled in computer jargon, can be quite overwhelming. Once you hit a certain low level, maybe around 10, those mobs, even with you, become quite tougher than you in comparison. So you go after those mobs that con blue, which is below your level, and eventually for some classes even that becomes too much to solo. So grouping becomes an absolute necessity for all but a few classes to the end of the game. On the flip side, what Project 1999 EverQuest offers is an MMO that is very challenging, and in light of that, very rewarding when you succeed in attaining levels or gear. This compared to any recent MMO such as the Old Republic or Guild Wars 2, which not only allows you to pretty much solo the game with impunity, but to also have death not matter. So there is no real sense of danger. Exploration matters because when you find something good in Project 1999 EverQuest, such as a great place to level, or some rare mob that drops something nice, it feels like you have accomplished something, as opposed to fleshing out the map just for a little bit of bonus XP like in the other mentioned MMOs. It's the challenge of the game that attracted me back to play it, and that challenge is missing from today's massively multiplayer games. The trade scales are brutal in comparison to any other MMO I have played, and it's not just in difficulty, but in cost of platinum. though when you are able to create something marketable to other players, you can more than recoup those losses and begin to see profit, sometimes greatly so. Returning to Classic EQ via Project 1999, I recreated my Wood Elf Ranger, and through a lot of time and platinum was finally able to create my True Shot bow. I was even able to sell it for 600 platinum, twice, so that means I have made 3 of those bows so far, which to me is enough just to have returned to Classic EQ. One thing Classic EQ offers is that of cultural and racial starting cities. These, in effect, can make you feel like you are actually part of that cultural or racial group. One just has to look at the tree platform city of the Wood Elves, the underground city of the Dark Elves, or the Flintstone-like Ogre City. All the cities, despite a lack of voiceovers or books to read about their lore, feel like real cities with a real history based upon the quests and conversations you can have with the NPCs. This to me was fantastic, and something you just didn't see in any game back then, and probably won't for newer games today. That they fully fleshed out the Troll City or Erudite City, complete with their own factions, aesthetics, and places to level up, is one thing I really feel will be missing from EverQuest Next, which will be coming out in the next few years. In EverQuest Next, all players begin in one place, regardless of race, and yes, I will be getting that MMO, and I will be making videos about it. However, one place to start for all, to my mind, is an extreme loss. Overall, Project 1999 EverQuest is like returning to my life of innocence and exploration before they held your hand with the current crop of MMOs. It's a world that felt alive, dangerous, and in order to succeed at all, you had to become a good player that knows the game. Too often in the Old Republic, especially once it went free to play, I'd run into people that don't know group mechanics at all, and having to teach them while in the middle of a flashpoint what a tank is and what taunt is, I'm not joking, is something I do not want to have to repeat. A half an hour dungeon, or sorry, flashpoint in the Old Republic, as it's called, took about 3 hours in that specific instance. Thank you very much to those who have brought back Classic EverQuest and Project 1999. When I leave your game, I will be happy and content that I got a chance to revisit the EverQuest in my memories, and also to look forward to new MMOs that will keep the spirit of danger and challenge that are alive in your emulated game. Thanks for watching, and for Let's Plays of various games, as well as videos of me playing my characters in Project 1999 EverQuest, please subscribe.